the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the infrastructure in place at every spot on the roster. Sims and I talked about their draft needs earlier today. Interior offensive line, a concern. Defensive line, and Ndamukong Suh's still unsigned, a concern. Jason Light spoke to reporters today, and among other things, he's obviously going to face questions about Tom Brady. He said he's had no discussions with Brady about 2023 or beyond. And that's a little different from what he had said previously when he was asked about it. Before, he would just, well, that we'll take care of that when we take care of it. Now it's we have had no discussions whatsoever, and not, oh, by the way, we plan to. I think the reality here is they're treating this as a self-contained 1 year. There's a no-tag provision in Tom Brady's contract, which means they can't keep him from hitting the open market next year. If he wants to go anywhere next year, he'll be able to do so. And given all of the chatter, the rumors, the reality that he had his eyes on Miami earlier this year when he retired 40 days before he unretired, we have to take very seriously the possibility we're going to see him with another team in 2023. And the Buccaneers' best play is to just not mention that as much as possible so it doesn't distract in any way from what they're trying to do this season.
Well, Mike, it's obvious that Tom Brady doesn't want to do an extension, right? And from the Bucs standpoint, they don't need to do an extension for salary cap purposes. But let's just throw this hypothetical out there at you. If you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady came to you and said, hey, I want to sign an extension. I want to sign a 1-year extension, presumably, whatever it is. But I want to sign an extension. If you're the Buccaneers, do you do that knowing that there's going to be a drop-off with Tom Brady at some point? Or do you like it like this? Do you like that it's only a 1-year deal right now, and after the season you reevaluate? And if he wants to move on, he wants to move on. If you can re-sign him, you re-sign him if he has a good year.
I think it depends on why he wants to sign the extension. Is he saying, I'm ready to make a 2-year commitment? Is he saying, I want more money? Because, frankly, I'm looking at his contract right now. $8.9 million base salary this year with a $1.4 million roster bonus. That is to reflect the 17th game. That's not a whole lot of money. That's under $11 million for Tom Brady. Now, he did get a $20 million signing bonus when they did the contract last year, but still, when you consider what some of these other guys are making, he could say, look, we're going to fill this stadium this year with me here. It wouldn't have been filled without me here. Let's go ahead and properly compensate me now, and I'll stick around for another year. If they're making that kind of offer, if Brady's camp is making that kind of offer, then maybe the Bucs listen to it. But I think anything they could do to know that if Brady plays at all in 2023, he plays for them, I think they'd be interested. But I think they'd feel compelled to do it if the argument was quite simply, I'm not making nearly enough money for what I bring to this team, because the truth is he's not making nearly enough money for what he brings to the team. But I also think this is 2019 all over again, when he basically entered his final year with the Patriots knowing it was his final year with the Patriots, and he tried to keep it under wraps as best he could. And there wasn't that collateral issue of retiring and unretiring, and why did he retire and why did he unretire, and what was he doing in the interim while he was retired? Was he eyeballing an opportunity to go somewhere else? That wasn't overlaying the reality in New England, so it wasn't as urgent and it wasn't as big of a distraction. And I think that's what this is all about. That's why, frankly, I believe that, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, that worthless interview on ESPN.com of Tom Brady as he was trying to push his golf clothing line as part of his Brady brand. He does not want to talk about anything else, because anything else he talks about, Charean, is going to be a distraction. And I think that if he and the Buccaneers are on the same page about anything, it's that they need to focus on this year and this year only, and minimize any and all distractions.
Yeah, and Mike, after this year, I know he's looking at he might have a better opportunity to go somewhere else and win. When you look at Miami's situation, certainly with Tua, and how is Tua going to play that out after all the offseason moves they've made? There are no excuses. As we've talked about many times, Mike, this is a do-or-die year for Tua. So if Tom Brady gets done with the Bucs, win a Super Bowl or not, he could be looking down the road to Miami going, you know what? That is a really good team, ready to win now, sort of like the Bucs were 2 years ago. I'm going to go there and win me another one with a third team. Already unprecedented anything and everything that he's done, but certainly winning with the third team would be completely unprecedented and never happen in this league again. I think you can probably safely say that.
There's a lot of things Tom Brady's done that's never going to happen again in this league. Definitely not in our lifetimes, maybe not in anyone's lifetime who is currently living. As it relates to one of the big issues from last year, as it related to Aaron Rodgers, how involved is he in decisions made by the front office, the attitude that they have toward him that he resents? You just work here, basically. We run the team. You throw the passes. Jason Light was asked today about whether to what extent Tom Brady is involved in front office decisions when it comes to the draft. Here's what Light had to say.
No, he stays away. You know, he trusts us. That's just not in his nature anyway. So.
Yeah, look, it's not in his nature. I don't know. I think he has a way of sending messages without directly sending messages. I think he doesn't want to dirty his hands or lower himself to being the guy who comes off as micromanaging. And really, at this point, what are they going to find for him in the draft this year that's going to help make the team better? He's more involved when it comes to, I want the people I know here. I want the people I've played with here. I want Gronk. I want Antonio Brown.
Shaq Mason.
I want Logan Ryan. I want Shaq Mason. I want guys back. I want to get Ryan Jensen to stick around. Draft picks aren't going to help him do jack diddly squat, not this year, and he'll back off on that. So I think it's not inaccurate. But as I talk my way through it, I realize the draft is hardly his priority when he's looking at most likely his last year with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mike. And maybe they get a player, who can come in and provide depth, and they have injuries like they did at corner last year. Maybe this year they'll have a guy who can step in and help them out of that jam. But overall, I mean, let's be realistic. Where they draft and the players that they have, there's not going to be a draft pick who's going to come and step in on this team and help Tom Brady win another Super Bowl, realistically. Maybe provide some snaps and some starts and stuff down the road, but Brady's looking at the veteran players that he has on this team, sort of the over-the-hill gang that Washington did back in George Allen's day, and the Rams have taken on that same philosophy. We want players who've proven that they can compete, that they can win, and that's what he's looking at, Mike, and he's done that. This is a good team, and especially being in the NFC, right now, when you look on paper, it's the Buccaneers and it's the Rams.
I see that Light was specifically asked about talk of Tom Brady going to the Dolphins in 23, and he said, I make of it as chatter. We're focused on putting our team together here with the draft, and we're all excited. We're all in lockstep here. Tom, Todd Bowles, myself, Byron Leftwich, entire coaching staff on this season. Gets to what we were talking about earlier. They're focused on right now. Everything else and anything else that they would discuss is a distraction. And they don't want to talk about it, and Brady doesn't want to talk about it, and that gets back to the interview that we were talking about earlier. And look, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to give you a fake apology, ESPN. That interview of Tom Brady was an embarrassment for everyone involved in it. It was not a real interview. It was a quote sheet, basically. I'd love to know what the parameters were on what could or couldn't be asked. It was a golf writer whose name escapes me. I'm sorry about that. But it's a golf clothing line, part of the Brady brand. I get all that. But it can't just be Tom Brady handpicking 3 or 4 quotes about why he came back and played for another year when there are so many issues, so many items of news, so many questions that have not been asked or answered of Tom Brady or by Tom Brady in recent weeks. You can't, in good conscience, run that interview without any of those questions being asked. If he doesn't want to answer them, he doesn't have to answer them. Tom Brady declined to comment on questions regarding whether he was poised to become a minority owner of the Miami Dolphins. Tom Brady declined to comment on questions regarding whether he was ready to take a front office position like the one Derek Jeter held with the Miami Marlins. Tom Brady declined to comment on whether or not he was hoping to play for the Miami Dolphins and partner up with Sean Payton. That can be in the story. You can't avoid asking the most pertinent and pressing questions surrounding Tom Brady. And then you have the whole Bruce Arians angle. The existence of friction or not between Tom Brady and Bruce Arians. Brady's never discussed that. Brady's Let's Go podcast ended Super Bowl week. A lot of stuff happened after Super Bowl week. The last we heard from Tom Brady, he's saying never say never about possibly coming back. Well, you got that right, Tom. But there's a lot of stuff that he needed to be asked. So, look, ESPN is in financial bed with Tom Brady. They've got the Man in the Arena docuseries that I still have yet to meet a single person who has watched it. That's not I'm just, you put it on ESPN Plus or Disney Plus. Who's going to go watch it? You put it on regular TV if you want people to watch it. And I understand. Look, I understand we're on Peacock, but I don't expect people to watch this. I would have expected that somebody would have watched the definitive docuseries on the career of Tom Brady. I have yet to talk to anybody who has. But business with ESPN, the NFT offering from ESPN, first ever. It's tied up with Brady's autograph company, this separate hustle. He's got plenty of hustles, and I don't knock it. It's great. The guy is an entrepreneur. The guy is using his name and his platform to do all sorts of things. I love it. It's inspiring. But you can't. You can't, in good conscience, have that interview. If you're Brady, if you're ESPN, if you're the reporter involved, that is an embarrassment to ESPN, to Brady, and to everyone involved, because it was worthless, because there is so much low-hanging fruit that is yet to be plucked. You can't interview him and not ask those questions, Charean.
Well, Mike, I wouldn't even call it a story. I would call it a press release because, frankly,
yes,
that's what it was. It was a press release from ESPN and Tom Brady about the clothing line. That's all it was. And to say it's a story, I think you lose credibility when you do that, because it wasn't, because the questions weren't asked that needed to be asked, that any good reporter would ask. And I don't know this guy. Maybe he's a good reporter. Maybe he had to do this. I don't know his story. But if he didn't ask those questions and was able to, by the agreement, whatever agreement they had, if they had an agreement, then he's not a very good reporter. And probably not a very good reporter if you agree to do this, unless ESPN says, look, you have to do this. You have to do this. You have to follow this agreement. That's the only way I would do something like that. If my employer made me do it and I had agreed to ask only certain questions in this interview, Mike, it's not real journalism. And you sully your name when you write something like that and cast it as a story, and at least explain in the story that you were limited in what you could ask, that you couldn't ask certain questions. It befuddles me that this was cast as a story, because it's not. It is embarrassing. That's the right word for it.
I will say this, if you go to the front page of ESPN.com right now, the top headline on the stack on the right rail is Bucs ignoring chatter around Brady. And when you click on it, it is their first story, substantive or otherwise, that acknowledges all of the reporting, all of the rumors, all of the stuff regarding Brady. And I think they finally were at the point where they had to deal with it, because Jason Light talked about it today. But they do say, and I about fell out of my chair here, Charean, let me see if I can find it again. Maybe it's already been deleted. Pro Football Talk reported that the Dolphins were prepared to announce Brady as a minority owner the week before the Super Bowl. Well, how about that? Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Thank you, ESPN. On the same day that we bashed them for their Brady infomercial / press release. So, sometimes they do the right thing. But that doesn't change the fact that interview was terrible, an embarrassment. And it was, as you say, a press release. And you can't, in good conscience, with access to Tom Brady, not ask those questions. And look, I've done this before, where you want to have somebody on PFT Live, get an interview. Hey, well, this person's going to be on. Well, they don't want to ask about this. It's like, well, then I'm not going to have them on, because I have to ask them about that. They can not answer. They can decline to answer, but I got to ask them the question, or I look like a hack. I look like a fool if I don't ask that question. And what also happens sometimes is we'll get somebody offered to us, and it will come with the, oh, by the way, so-and-so doesn't want to talk about X. Well, I wasn't going to ask about it anyway, but now that they do that, I want to. And then I go through the whole thing. Is it, I really wasn't going to ask about it. I don't care about it. Am I going to cancel the entire interview simply because they don't want me to ask about a topic I wasn't going to ask about? Usually in that situation, I'll go forward with it. But if it is something, like if Tom Brady was offered to us today, fat chance, but and I've interviewed him before. He was very gracious after Super Bowl 51. It was great. We had him on for 25 minutes when the show was on NBCSN a few years back. But if I was offered him right now, there's no way I would agree to avoid Dolphins questions. Arians questions. Now, you want to phrase them the right way. You don't want to be disrespectful to the guy, but it's like, Tom, he's not keeping his head in the sand. This isn't an insult to the emperor to ask him these questions. These are fair questions for him to be asked. And then he answers them, and we assess whether or not he's full of crap, because he told us on the shop last June, 90% of the things he says in press conferences aren't true. So everything he says, from my perspective, gets passed through an even thicker crap filter than before. But still, if you're going to interview him, you got to ask all those questions. You have to ask all those questions, or you're wasting everyone's time.
Well, and it'll be interesting, Mike, to see when and if he talks to the Bucs media, because all those questions will be asked. We know our friend Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times will be in there, and others who are going to ask those questions to Tom Brady. So they'll get asked at some point. The question is, when are the Bucs going to make him available to the media? And hopefully it's sooner than later, Mike, and we get to hear from Tom Brady and we get all the answers to those questions. If we do, it'll be a great day for PFT, because we'll have multiple posts. And I know he won't say much. As you said, he's good at dancing around questions, but there still will be multiple posts from Tom Brady, because all those questions will be asked.
They'll be asked, and we'll see what he has to say about them. Unless, sometimes when you become this ultra superstar living legend, I think what happens in a press conference setting, and Charean, you know better than me, you've been in more of these than I have. I typically stay in my cave, but what happens is when you've got 10, 15 people in a room and there are delicate questions to be asked, I think the dynamic arises that some wait for others to ask that tough question. Have you experienced that, where you feel like everybody's kind of waiting around for who's going to be the one to acknowledge that, there's a topic that this person would rather not discuss?
Well, I'll provide a perfect example here. The Thanksgiving Day game, when Josh Norman ran off the field and said, because he had dominated Des Bryant, and said Des Bryant needs to give back whatever the millions it was, needs to give back that money because he's not worth it. Well, didn't get to talk to Des Bryant until the next week. No one wanted to ask those questions except guess who? I asked the first question, and I'm waiting for, and he's mad, and I'm waiting for somebody to ask the second one, and they just let me. So I basically had a one-on-one that everybody else was filming and taping, and Des got mad at me, obviously, for asking those questions from a week earlier. But yeah, it's something you have to do, and sometimes people wait for that one reporter to ask those questions and get somebody mad at them. So you have to take that sometimes. But the questions have to be asked, Mike. And, veterans like Rick Stroud who've done this for 30 years, they're used to asking those hard questions.
I think we are having some technical difficulties with Charean. I'll share this story while we try to enhance and improve her connection. I have given Tom Curran a hard time about this in the past, because when Bill Belichick faces reporters, a lot of times it's the equivalent of an audience with the disembodied head of Oz with the flashpots spewing flames on each side. And I've asked Tom in the past, why didn't a given topic come up? And there's a pragmatism to it. We know he's not going to answer the question. And we know that the moment that question is asked, every question after that is a waste of time, because he shuts down after that. He's not going to give you a real answer once you cross that bridge that pisses him off. And I look at that and I say, you still ask the questions anyway, because as I've said time and again, if Bill Belichick doesn't appreciate the media component of his career as an NFL head coach, he should go coach high school lacrosse, where no one cares. All due respect to high school lacrosse, they don't care to the same level that they care about pro football, and you get paid accordingly. So part of why he's paid all that money is because people care intensely. So you do have to make yourself available. And there are times where he gives like these ridiculously long answers out of nowhere. But when there's a delicate subject that he doesn't want to discuss, the explanation that I've heard is, when you ask him that, it's not that anyone's afraid to ask him. It's that they know that after that question is asked, the rest of the press conference becomes a waste of time.
Well, that's it, Mike. You look at his answers on a transcript, and a lot of them are so long, 5, 7, 9 minutes long, and he's just stalling. He's just waiting, to get through and go, hey, I did my 7 minutes, 8 minutes. What after the Super Bowl, 2 years ago, what did he do? 5 minutes or 6 minutes or something, or like 3 questions or something? So, yes, there's a lot of that. And then you're right, if he gets one he doesn't like, he's going to just shut it down and say, I'm done, I'm out. And he did his obligation. He met the media access obligation, and he moved on. But he's done this so long, Mike, he knows how to say only what he wants to say. Say what he wants to say, but only what he wants to say, Mike.
Yeah, and again, that doesn't mean that the questions should never be asked, and especially for a guy like Tom Brady, who isn't repeatedly meeting with the media, who's available to speak to ESPN.com, you have to ask those questions.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.